Hey, welcome. This is Jason Clemmons, Doctor of Chiropractic at the Rock Health and Wellness Center, and this is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. It is February the 5th, Wednesday, and we're live right here from the Rock Health and Wellness Center studios and on 98.7 Walk by Faith Radio and 1420 AM. We're live on our Facebook page, our YouTube, and our X. Even after last night's show, we're live. Even then, we're bringing it to you again tonight. And what an experience this has been this week. Take health to church. First, I screwed up the weekend, missing my buddy's wedding. And then we took health to church and learned about how we're going to reform our declarations in the way that as we learn. So I learned from my weekend mistake and have been working on my declarations on that. And then tonight we're going to finish up this book, Inoculated: How Science Lost Its Soul in Autism by Kent Heckenlively. So been reading this book all week long, and I can tell you I'm tired of it. To me, I was thinking about it today. I am tired. I'm tired of this book. I'm tired of this subject. I'm tired of the weight of this subject. It's like I don't know how people do it, to tell you the honest truth. I don't know how they do it. My hat's off to all you guys over in the medical field that can do this all day long, every day, over and over again. I've tried to take another deep dive into this whole vaccine thing this week, and it's Wednesday and I'm done with it. It's kind of funny. It's like, look, man, I'm a wellness guy. Like, I love wellness. Like, Leslie's got these balloons up in the office, and it's our 20th year. Friday is my 20th anniversary of my getting my chiropractic license. February 7th of 2005, I got my chiropractic license, and it's like I come to work inspired every day. Nearly, I mean, it's like I think about look back at the last 20 years, and man, the majority of those days, especially the longer I go, is inspiring. It's about wellness. And deep diving in, reading this book and diving into this stuff and trying to get a little bit a new perspective. Like, what is there something new that I haven't learned? Like, am I missing something? And I'm not missing anything. There's nothing new that's come up that I didn't learn in chiropractic school about this subject, and it's like it's really been interesting. So I worked on it all day today. Went through a bunch of stuff today, and I was just like, you know what, that's it's like enough already. Let's get back to some innate intelligence. Let's get back to some subluxation reduction. Let's get back to some eat well, move well, think well, Dr. Chestnut, right? Let's get back into doing some things that are like, it's like this subject is depressing. Now, having said that, let me just make sure that I don't discount it, because I'm serious about it, right? I'm very serious about the subject, and I have a stance on the subject. And if you wanted to call me anti-vaccine, go ahead. I'm totally fine with that. I've been listening to a bunch of people. I listened to Robert De Niro talk a little bit this week. I've listened to Robert Kennedy talk this week. I've listened to several. This book's full of people talking, and a lot of people will say that. They'll say it right off the bat. They'll be like, "Look, I'm not anti-vaccine. I just want safe vaccines, whatever." Right? It's like, okay, fine. Until you prove and until you actually create that issue, um, I don't feel the need to preface the way I feel about it by saying that, okay, I'm not really anti-vaccine. That's one of the things. That's my reform, my declaration. Now, let me be totally clear. It is not my game. Like, this whole thing is not my game. It is not. It's not wellness at all. It's not wellness at all. It's medical practice. It's sick care. And so and legally, and I'm saying it, I want to make sure that everybody out there gets it. I'm not advocating one way or the other for it. That's between you and your medical doctor. Medical stuff is between you and your medical doctor. Wellness stuff, subluxation stuff, now you and I can have conversations about it. But I'm not. So don't turn me in, get me all in trouble with the board and all that stuff. I'm not saying anything about it. That's between you and your medical doctor. I have my own stance on it, but from a business standpoint, from a what I do for a living standpoint, man, we got a better gig over here. I I, I was so inspired just thinking about we the thing that we've got is like it's like why would I slow down from all of this wellness that goes on at the Rock Health and Wellness Center to get into the muck and the mire of whether or not we should go about it, like get our shots. I mean, that's it's just not, man. I'm telling you that you have an innate intelligence, and if you put yourselves in an environment that's congruent with health, you're going to express health, right? But I have learned some things. I've heard some sentences that I think are discussable, worth discussing. I've heard some sentences that I think are worth discussing, and I want to go through the book tonight, and I want to finish up the book because I do not want to finish my 20th year of, of of chiropractic and messing with this stuff. I worked on it a long time ago. I made a decision a long time ago. I waited on Judy Mikovits to show up. She explained it all to me. Then, and Ken Heckenlive is the one that wrote her book, Plague, and Ending of Plague, and End of Corruption, and all this sort of thing. And Judy breaks it down, and I'll show it to you tonight. I'll show you a few things that I think are worth discussing. And I want it to be very clear that the things that we're discussing is not my opinion. Things that we're discussing is just things in the book. Okay? And so, what is the book about? The book is about the whole journey of is autism related in any form or fashion to the vaccine schedule, the MMR vaccine? And it started because we have some measles cases that are in Lubbock right now. There's a little town called Seminole that's not too far from here, and there's some kids down there that have that. I talked to one of my nurses that works in the pediatric ICU this morning, and she said that there was 5 kids in the hospital, and I said, and they had one of them has RSV and measles together, and I said, hey, did they ever use vitamin A in the hospitals? And she's just looked at me and she's like, no, we don't do any of that stuff, right? But those people need to be taken care of by the people in the hospital. That's fine. That's their game. They do that thing and they do it great. And I'm glad those kids are over there and they do it great. And I hope all those kids get out of that hospital and we can move along, right? But that's what started it all. And then I've been kind of waiting on this book, so I ordered the book. I read the book over the weekend, and that's what we're talking about tonight. So let's just get into it. Let's get into it. And let's calm down a little bit. Let's don't be too fired up getting into it. So the thing that happens when you start talking about vaccines is the pro-vaccine people and the anti-vaccine people, that there's almost no common ground between the two of them. Like it's just like it really is a bipolar type of thing. And the pro-vaccine people operate as if there's never been a problem with a vaccine. There's never been an injury of a vaccine. There's never been anything. Like all you guys are just making this stuff up. Thimerosal is not a problem. XMRV is not a problem. None of this retrovirus stuff is a problem. There's the volume of it is not any problem. I was listening to Paul Offit talk last night with Dr. Mike, and I've seen Dr. Mike a few times on things. I went to YouTube last night and watched that, and I don't know anything about he's Dr. Mike. You guys might know who it is. He's got 13.4 million subscribers on YouTube, and he's Dr. It looks like Mikhail Mike Varshavsky. He's a DO and seemed like a really nice guy. And he does a great job with his thing. He and I probably have a lot of things that we don't agree on at all. But I was listening to him talk to Paul Offit last night. And Paul Offit is not one of my favorite people in the world, but he's got his own thing. And they were just sitting there talking. He's a pediatrician. He's an American pediatrician specializing in infectious diseases, vaccines, immunology, and virology. And he's 73 years old, and he's been around. So I first heard of him when I was listening to Judy Mikovits stuff. He's in the book here, and he's got his own way. But I was just watching those two guys talk to each other. And that circle doesn't understand anything about the outside of that circle. And I could say the same thing goes both ways, right? I could say that there's a lot of things that are inside that circle that the people that are on the anti-vaccine side of it could probably learn from the people that are on the inside of it. If we would just all sit down together and have a conversation with each other and try to help each other work through this, I think that would be a little bit better way of doing it. Now, it might get hard to do, and you might just have to draw a line in the sand, and you might just have to say, look, we just have different ways of looking at this. And that's kind of where I've gotten to myself. It's like, as long as you don't mandate to me what I'm supposed to do, I think that, look, good enough. If you want to do it, go ahead. And if I don't want to do it, then I should be free to not do it. But because I was just listening to him talk, and I was listening to, you guys can go listen. It's Paul Offit talking to Dr. Mike. You can go. It's about an hour and 45-minute thing. I listened to it last night, and I was watching the Red Raiders whip up on the Baylor Bears in basketball, and they were talking about the COVID vaccine. These are just, and I just wrote down some of the things. And Dr. Mike asked Paul Offit, because he's on some CDC or FDA, he's on some CDC or FDA committee on vaccines. Like he's a big dude. Like he's a big dog in the whole government stuff. And what he said was, how do you know? He said the question of like they were talking about the COVID vaccine specifically, and he said, do you know enough? Because Dr. Mike asked him, do you ever worry that you're about to make a recommendation that you're not 100% sure if it's good for people or not? And Dr. Offit said, yeah, you just lay in bed thinking about that stuff. Just, did you miss something? And they were having a great conversation. And he said, the question just becomes, do you know enough? Not that you know everything, but do you know enough? And he said on December 10th of 2020, they got all the stuff from Pfizer. And a week later, they got all the stuff from Moderna. And it was about 150 to 200 pages of stuff. And it was all the phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials from the drug companies. And it was another 200 pages from the FDA that reviewed it all. And so he said, I had about 400 pages I had to read. And Dr. Mike asked him, how long did you have to read that? And he said, 1 week. That's how quickly the government was working during 2020. They had 200 pages of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. And he explained it exactly like we explained it last night on the show. He said there was 40,000 people in the Pfizer deal and there was 30,000 people in the Moderna deal. Well, if you want to know, go back last night. I'll show you exactly the 43,000 people that were in the Pfizer thing and how they split them in half, and they did the trials and all that sort of thing. And he said, you read them all in a week. And he said, well, did you see anything that worried you? And he said, yeah. He said, we saw Bell's palsy in the Pfizer thing, in the Pfizer vaccine, that some of those people were getting Bell's palsy from it. And he said, but once we gave it to several million people, that kind of washed itself out. Except for the ones that got the Bell's palsy, right? It kind of washed itself out statistically because there was enough people in the survey, in the bunch that you gave it to, but there was people that was a thing, right? And it wasn't a thing that they're going to mention to you before you take it. They're not going to come out and say, okay, now wait, in the trial, the Pfizer trial, that there was a Bell's palsy thing. And he said it wasn't a real problem. And then you recommended it, and then you find out some of the things that happen. And he said that the mRNA vaccine created myocarditis in boys 16 to 29 after the second dose within 4 days. And he was like, it's a small price to pay for what we were faced with. And that's the those are the things that I listen to when I'm listening to them talk. I listen to, okay, that's a fair enough assessment, but it was interesting that Paul Offit admitted that this Pfizer vaccine caused myocarditis in these 16 to 19 or 16 to 29-year-old boys after the second shot. And as a wellness doctor, what my approach to that thing is why are 16 to 29-year-old boys getting the COVID shot? Because I think the fundamental things that we teach in the wellness world can solve their problem. They can if they would just decrease their inflammation, if they would just do their vitamin D, if they would just take their fish oil, if they would just decrease their sugar, they can turn around and face it head on. And he made the comment in the video that you're way better off if you get the natural virus than if you get the vaccine for immunity, because you got all 4 proteins in there. He actually said if you get the vaccine and the virus, then you've got memory for life. And I'm like, yeah, or just get the virus, because that's the way it's always been. And the more you have this Th2 response, you get this Th1 response, you get this Th2 response. If the sickness lasts a little bit longer and you move through these 2 responses, then you'll end up with this stronger memory T cell that's going to help you all the way through the rest of your life. Okay? But my thing is, and that's the same thing that I thought as a wellness doctor when this whole thing was happening, was what do we do in the wellness world? Because one of the most awesome things that we have in our profession, in chiropractic, especially in the state of Texas, is we do not have the ability to do any pharmaceuticals. That is such a blessing, because it sharpens the sword of your game way better. I cannot turn to a shot in your knee. I cannot turn to a prednisone. I cannot turn to an antibiotic. I cannot turn to any of those things within my scope of practice. So what do I have to do? I have to look harder. I have to work harder. I have to look deeper. I have to study harder. I have to understand bigger picture stuff, because I can't just turn to, well, my knee hurts. Is my knee swollen up? So I went to my doctor and got a shot in my knee. Oh, it feels much better. Fair enough. I can't compete with that. Now, is there any negative effects to getting a shot in your knee? And the answer to that's yes. Is there any negative effects on your adrenal gland when you get that cortisone shot? Yes. Is there any negative effects to long-term joint function with that shot? Yes. Did you get that conversation with any of those things? No. You didn't get that conversation at all. And the same thing with this, what Dr. Offit's saying here about this vaccine. He's like, there was myocarditis in boys, okay? And then he said the Johnson & Johnson, the 30-person study, what they found after they said it was okay. So they went through committee, their committee met, all these gurus that know everything there is to know about this stuff, and a lot of them, I'm sure, are good people, and they're trying hard, not trying to be sarcastic. But what they said was, yes, yes, you can take it. And then you're going to work someplace, and they're not going to let you come to work unless you get the shot. So what shot you going to get? I don't know. I'm going to get the Moderna shot, or I'm going to get the Johnson & Johnson shot, or I'm going to get the Pfizer shot. Okay, well, you get the Johnson & Johnson. Here's what he said. Well, what we found out was to be the case of clotting, including severe clotting, including clotting in the brain, that ultimately drove the vaccine off the market by March of 2023. Now, hold up just a second. Hold up. You didn't know that was the fact, and there's no way that you could have known that was the fact, right? You didn't know that it didn't show up in the 30,000 person study. But now what you're telling me is that after the fact, after we gave it to millions of people, after that it was okayed by our government, after our president stood up and said, you need to get vaccinated, and all the governors and all the senators and all the people and all the people in the town and all the people that were throwing stones at you said, here, you need to do that. What about the people? He said it was so damaging that they had to take it off the market. And he said, how did you not know that? I think you should. I think you should have realistic expectations of the fact that you are going to learn as you go. And then he said, Operation Warp Speed, an $11 billion outlay to take the risk out of pharmaceutical companies. If it doesn't work, you can throw it all away and there will be no financial risk. We're going to pay for all your trials. We're going to pay for the building that you're going to build it in. We're going to pay for all your supplies. We're going to let you make it. And if anything goes wrong, you're going to have no liability for it. And we're going to do it all. And he said that is the greatest. He said that was, I think, this was a quote, I think that was the greatest scientific or medical accomplishment in my lifetime. Okay. My point, what I'm saying now is people just see things differently. Is he right or wrong? Neither one. He's just him. And he's just doing what he thinks is best. Whatever his motive is, that's what he's doing. Okay. He thinks that's the greatest thing in his lifetime, the warp speed. And I'm thinking to myself, I got 79-year-old patients that have 2-to-1 omega-6-3 ratios that had no problem whatsoever of getting through COVID. They're still working out. They're going to come in here and work out in the morning. They worked out all the way through COVID, most of them. That they handled the virus without any chance of getting myocarditis from the vaccine or without any chance of getting a blood clot in their brain by doing wellness things. And to me, the greatest scientific or medical accomplishment in my lifetime, in his world, it's the greatest accomplishment in his lifetime. And in my world, it's a bunch of crap. It's like, why are we giving it to these people? Okay, fine. There's a group of population of people that might need it. Okay. But nobody talked about wellness during that time frame. Nobody is talking about vitamin A with these kids with measles in the hospital. Nobody is talking about the fact that there may be, I don't know if there is, but there may be a relationship between an MMR vaccine and autism. And who says that? Dr. Andrew Zimmerman right here says it. Dr. Andrew Zimmerman, MD, is a board-certified pediatrician neurologist and a former director of medical research, Center for Autism and Related Disorders, Kennedy Krieger Institute, and Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. This is an affidavit right here. I've even got it for you somewhere. So just in case you don't think I'm crazy, I'm just reading it, okay? And he said, I was a reviewer for the National Academy of Sciences 2004 report entitled Immunization Safety Review, Vaccines and Autism, which was prepared by the Immunization Safety Review Committee at the request of the Centers for the Disease Control and Prevention, the National Institutes of Health, and the Institute of Medicine. A copy of my curriculum vitae is attached here to an Exhibit A and incorporated reference. It's a big, long one. This guy is legit right here, okay? In 2007, I was an expert witness for the Department of Health and Human Services in the Omnibus Autism proceeding under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Compensation Program. With the assistance of the Department of Justice, I prepared and executed an attached expert witness opinion regarding Michelle Cedillo on behalf of the Department of Health and Human Services in Cedillo versus the HHS. My expert opinion in Cedillo versus HHS is attached as Exhibit B and states in pertinent part as follows. Now, this is what, when he worked with the lawyers, this is what they came up with was his answer. There is no scientific basis for connection between measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine or mercury intoxication and autism. Despite well-intentioned and thoughtful hypothesis and widespread belief about the apparent connection with autism and regression, there's no sound evidence to support the causative relationship with exposure to both or either MMR and or mercury. Michelle Cedillo had a thorough and normal immunological evaluation by Dr. Sudhir Gupta, showing no signs of immunodeficiency that would have precluded her from responding normally to the MMR vaccine. My expert opinion regarding Michelle Cedillo also states, furthermore, there is no evidence of an association between autism and the alleged reaction to MMR and mercury, and is more likely than not that there is a genetic basis for autism in this child. So that was a blanket statement right there. Well, then on Friday, June 15th of 2007, this is his affidavit. It says, I was present during a portion of the OAP to hear the testimony of the petitioner's expert in the field of pediatric neurology, Dr. Marcel Kingsborn. During a break in the proceedings, I spoke to the DOJ attorney and specifically led the lead DOJ attorney, Vincent Matakowski. I didn't say that right. In order to clarify my written expert opinion. I clarified that my written expert opinion regarding Michelle Cedillo was a case-specific opinion as to Michelle Cedillo. My written opinion regarding Michelle Cedillo was not intended to be a blanket statement to all children and all medical science. I explained that I was of the opinion that there were exceptions in which vaccinations could cause autism. More specifically, I explained that a subset of children with an underlying mitochondrial dysfunction, vaccine-induced fever, and immune stimulation that exceeded metabolic energy reserves could, and at least in one of my patients did, cause regressive encephalopathy with features of autism spectrum disorder. And this is how it goes. This is the battle that a lot of people face right here. And we got to take a break. We'll be right back. And I just want to keep going with this and keep talking about this as maturely as we can. So you guys stick around. We'll be right back right after these messages. Now listen what happens after he clarified this, when he went and talked to the head attorney, and he made that whole thing right there. I'll read it one more time. More specifically, I explained that in a subset of children with an underlying mitochondrial dysfunction, vaccine-induced fever and immune stimulation that exceeded metabolic energy reserves could, and in at least one of my patients did, cause regressive encephalopathy with features of autistic spectrum disorder. I explained that my opinion regarding exceptions in which the vaccine could cause autism was based upon advances in science, medicine, and clinical research in one of my patients in particular. Hang on, my papers are stuck. Okay. For confidential reasons, I did not state the name of my patient, however, specifically referenced and discussed with Mr. Matakowski and the other DOJ attorneys that were present the medical paper, Development, Regression, and Mitochondrial Dysfunction in Child with Autism. And you can look that up. You can go to Google Scholar and just do that. Developmental Regression and Mitochondrial Dysfunction with a Child with Autism, which was published in the Journal of Child Neurology and co-authored by John Poling, MD, and a few other guys. Shortly after I clarified my opinions with the DOJ attorney, I was contacted by one of the junior attorneys and informed that I would no longer be needed as an expert witness on behalf of HHS. A telephone call in which I was informed that the DOJ would no longer need me as a witness on behalf of HHS occurred after the above referenced conversation on Friday, June 15th, 2007, and before Monday, June 18th. To the best of my recollection, I was scheduled to testify on behalf of HHS on Monday, June 18th, 2007. Now, people wonder why you lose trust in leadership. And part of the problem we have with trying to make a decision was the same problem that I had when my daughter was born. Who can I go ask to give me an answer that I can make a decision on? Who are the people? The ones that think, well, if we end up with myocarditis and blood clots in your brain, it's just part of the process. It's just, hey, we got this stuff done in a short amount of time. It was a miracle, greatest miracle of my life. Do I go ask Paul Offit that question? Do I go ask Dr. Zimmerman? And he can say, hey, well, you got to make sure your kids don't have mitochondrial dysfunction, right? Hang on. Hey, we're back. This is Life with Jason Clemmons, DC. And we are back, and we're breaking it down tough tonight. So, um, the point of the is you can't trust everything you hear from everybody that says it. And what I have come to understand about this is that you got to have a broad range of both sides of the story. If you're an anti-vaccine person and you just tie into that right there and you never listen to anybody from the other side, I personally think you're doing yourself a disservice. If you're a pro-vaccine person and you never take into consideration that we might find out afterwards that it causes blood clots in the brain and we take it off the market in 2023. Now, who knew that was the case? Right? Did we have a national conversation about that? Did the president of the United States get back on television and say, "I'm sorry that I made the recommendation for you guys that had a blood clot in your brain from this Johnson and Johnson deal. I'm sorry that happened to you." I don't remember that. I don't remember whether he's Republican or Democrat. I don't remember our president saying that, right? So the thing about it is like, what are some of the things that we can do? What are the things from a wellness standpoint that we can do to try to eliminate some of these challenges that we might end up having? Because one thing that happens over and over and over again in the autism group, they have a common theme. And it doesn't matter, just if you read a book, if you go online, if you talk to people in the office. I talked to some people that work at autism places here in town today. And it's a common thing that you hear. My child was fine, and then they got vaccinated, and then they weren't fine. And that's what Kent Heckenlively says in his book. And if you think to yourself, well, this is all made up. This is all made up. It may be biased. I'll give him that. Because how could you not be? His daughter has autism, and she's 20-something years old, and he's never had a conversation with her, and she's been trapped inside her head. I've had patients like that. I've had patients that I can look in their eyes, and I know they're trapped in there, and I can't figure out how to get them out of there. And it's got to be gut-wrenching for the parents that have to deal with this. It's definitely challenging for the doctors that are trying to deal with this, because you try everything that you can possibly try and you can't get them to unlocked. And that little kid looks at you in the eyes and he's like, are you going to try harder? Like, what do you got for me? Like, I've had that. I've had that little kid in my office, and I've had him look at me in the eyes. Sometimes I'm in a grocery store or at Target or something like that, and I'll see some little kid in a stroller, and he just looks up at me, and he's just sitting there with his sippy cup, and his mom's there, and he just looks at me, and I just feel like he's looking at me, and he's saying to me, "Are you going to try harder? Like, is anyone going to try harder to try to make sure that this stuff doesn't happen? Or are we just going to say it's just part of the process? You know, if you just happen to get a brain clot, I'm sorry that happened to you, but, just think how many people's lives we saved by getting them vaccinated. None of them, a lot of them in my office didn't get vaccinated, and they're still alive. Believe that. And some of them are old people. They're like in their 70s and in their 80s. Like some of them like that. Like they're still alive. And they didn't. And so it's sometimes it's challenging. Okay. I want to read a little bit about just a couple of quotes from the book, and then we can go along and get rid of this book. You guys can get it if you want, but there's one doctor that is doing some really good work, and he's really trying hard. He doesn't want to be involved in all this stuff, but he's trying pretty hard about trying to make it happen. But he does describe some things. And I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Robert Naviaux, Naviaux. I guess, professor of medicine, pediatrics, and pathology at the University of California at San Diego. One of the things that he does, since 1996, he depicts the cell danger response as a one-ring. No, I'm not going to get into that. But the cell danger response is what he kind of talks about, and one of the things he talks about is overstimulating the immune system of a pregnant mouse is exactly how you produce something similar to autism in her offspring. This is how Navio detailed the creation of the mice with autism-like features. In the MIA maternal immune activation model of ASD, autism spectrum disorder, adult females were exposed to a stimulated viral infection by injection of a synthetic double-stranded RNA poly at a vulnerable time during pregnancy. This produced offspring with neurodevelopment abnormalities associated with autism spectrum disorder and schizophrenia. Injected poly RNA is not replicated, but is recognized by the antiviral response machinery within the cell. What he's saying is, in this book, is he's saying that that you got to watch out what's going on with the mom. You don't want to, and what Heck and Lively kind of shows that to be like is a flu shot for the mom. It's the same kind of, it's basically kind of the same kind of deal, right? In March 2013, Nabio and his team published in their findings in the PLOS1 using Suraman and describing a complete new theory for the origin and treatment of autism using ATP. Navio and colleagues introduced the concept that a large majority of both genetic and environment causes for autism act by producing a sustained cell danger response, the metabolic state underlying innate immunity and inflammation. So you're creating a response inside the cell, and if you want to go, I was listening to Judy Mikovits this week, and if you want to go back and listen to Judy, she's got a couple of articles. If you want the information, I'll send it to you. She's got a couple of YouTube videos, and she's talking about the response and turning off the response. That when you have an immune response, you get this Th1 and this Th2 response, and you also get a T17 response, and it all has to do with the initial response and the adapted response. And we talked a lot about that. And when we were going through COVID, one of the things that we wanted to do is we wanted to have a strong initial response and a weak secondary response. And I got this article right here. I just looked up T helper cell subset response in determining T helper cell subset response is a determining factor in COVID-19 progression. The immune response type organized against viral infection is determinant in the prognosis of some infections. This work has aimed to study Th polarization in acute COVID-19 and its possible associations with the outcome through an observable prospective study. And when it goes down to the bottom, it says this: the study has shown that increased levels of interleukin-15 and a high Th2 response are associated with a fatal outcome in the disease. So as a wellness guy, when I'm reading Navio, I'm sorry if I'm saying his name wrong, and he's talking about this, and what kind of response we have. And then I listen to Judy, and Judy's talking about this. She breaks it all down, and she's talking about we got to be able to turn this inflammation off. We can't, if the inflammation stays too high, then we're going to have a problem right there. What I have to do is I have to take all those pieces of information and I have to pull them into the wellness world, and I have to start breaking down how do you keep that from happening? Like, how do you get this response that you need? Sorry, I didn't say that very well. This is what we wrote up on the board way back during COVID. This is the thing that I had on our board in the adjusting room during that time period. An immune response. If you get a strong initial response, then a weaker secondary response. That's a better outcome and less severe symptoms. But if you get a weaker initial response, the Th1 response, then a strong Th2 response, that's a worse outcome, and you'll end up with pneumonia and death. And that's what this is saying right here. And this is original research article, Frontier Cell Infection Microbiology, 25 February 2021. The frontiers of whatever, science. Okay, it's saying the same thing. The study has shown that increased levels of interleukin-15, which is an inflammatory thing, and a high Th2 response are associated with a fatal outcome of the disease. That's a bad thing. You don't want that. So what do you want? You want a strong initial response. What does a strong initial response mean? It means that you're healthy when you face the tiger. It means that your body is ready for the virus when the virus shows up. That means that your immune system is responding and on when you are exposed to the virus. It is the foundational thing that we talk about in health all the time. Be ready for whatever you have to face. And when are you going to face it? You don't know. So be ready all the time. Right? It's like you got to be ready for this stuff. And then when you're ready for it, so how do you keep your immune system strong? You know, one of the things that they were saying during COVID was what's going to happen when you get an initial immune response? You're going to get a fever. How many of us have been taught to get your fever down? Like within 24 hours, like you're freaking out if you have 102 fever in 24 hours. But what is a fever? A fever is the cytokine being released from the white blood cell that's fighting the virus, that's sending the signal to the hypothalamus in the brain to tell them to turn the temperature up so we have an advantage in the fight. That's what a fever is. What do we want? We want a strong initial response. But one of the things that they told us to do is go home and take Tylenol. What does Tylenol do? Tylenol depletes glutathione off of the lung cell because you use glutathione to get rid of Tylenol in your liver. Where's the fight? This is a respiratory virus. Where's the fight? The respiratory virus is the fight is happening on the lung, in the lung cell, on the alveolar sac, on that single cell little sac that you breathe in and you breathe out, and you exchange that oxygen through that one little cell. And it's the craziest thing ever that when God decided to put that one cell in that lung so that you could exchange the oxygen and the carbon dioxide across that membrane without having to go through a whole thick skin worth of stuff, he put a Marines on the wall. He put the Marines on the wall called glutathione. They're there to help fight. The glutathione is an antioxidant, and it does all those things. It helps protect that cell. But what happens when we take Tylenol? If you take Tylenol just take it for 8, 12 hours, whatever it is, and now all of a sudden you deplete the glutathione in your liver cell, and the liver will send out a signal to all the cells in the body and say, hey, send me your glutathione. So what do? I take my Marines off the wall. What happens? It weakens my initial response. Number one, I've taken the Tylenol, which has reduced my fever. And number two, I've pulled the glutathione off the wall, which has now given me a weaker response. What do I end up with? Pneumonia and death. It's not wellness. And wellness is good enough to fight. Wellness is good enough to fight some of this stuff. Wellness, you have an innate intelligence. So when I talk about innate intelligence, I'm not talking about it like it's the Easter Bunny or Santa Claus. I'm talking about innate intelligence like it's the power of God in your body. That's what I learned. That's why I'm so fired up about coming to work every day. It's like I get to work with innate intelligence every day. Tell me something that's better than that. Like, are you kidding me? People say, do you miss coaching? I miss not making $5 million a year. Sure, that'd be great. But do you think I miss coaching for 1 second over the idea that I get to come to work and work on the innate intelligence of the human body every single day? Oh, you got to be kidding me. And that's wellness to me. Wellness in the innate intelligence and the subluxation is interference in the nervous system, which is inhibiting our initial response, which is making that initial response weaker. How come there's some people that will not get the flu this year, and there are other people that get the flu? What's the difference? That goes all the way back to what my brother-in-law was talking about. My brother-in-law he used to ask me that question 25 years ago this March. How come, you remember back when we were kids and there was 25 kids in our class and 15 kids got the flu and 10 kids didn't get the flu? Why didn't the 10 kids get the flu? Because they weren't exposed to the flu virus? Nope. They were exposed to the flu virus. How did they keep themselves from getting sick? Because they had an innate immune response that was strong. They had a strong one. They had neutrophils kicking butt in the lung. They had Marines on the wall that was slaughtering those things. They were like, no, you can't come in. You cannot come in. That's why I had 102 fever for 11 straight days with COVID. Do you think I, for 1 second, thought about getting my fever down? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I was kicking butt to a virus that Dr. Offit says came from an animal in stall number 42 or whatever at the Wuhan wet market. Whatever. That's a belief system that he's going to go with. That's fair enough. I don't care. I don't care where it comes from. I lost patience over it. They said, "Were you worried about this virus?" I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not worried about this virus because I got an innate immune system. It might take it 11 days to kill it. It might take it 11 days to fight it, but I can tell you one thing, it's going to fight it because it's ready to fight. It's ready to go right there, right?" And you say, well, is there been any other sentences that you that you want to read? Yes. There's a bunch of studies. You guys could get the book, but there's one place, if you've been listening to RFK talk at all, he talks about this Simpson Woods situation. And I don't know all the background of why they went to this place. RFK says they're trying to get off of the CDC property so they wouldn't have to explain it to everybody and it wouldn't be part of a Open Information Act or whatever. But this is chapter 5. It says the CDC runs away to Simpson Wood to defend mercury in vaccines. And I'm just reading the book. June 7th, 2000. Dr. Walter Orenstein, director of the National Immunization Program, looked out at the distinguished gathering of medical professionals he had summoned to Simpson Wood Retreat Center in Norcross, Georgia, as he prepared to make his opening remarks. Orenstein's decision to have the meeting off campus from the CDC headquarters in Atlanta was based on his erroneous belief that such a meeting would not be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. That's what I just said, right? The information would come to the attention of most of the public through an article written by RFK Jr., nephew of former President John F. Kennedy. You guys know who he is, right? And he wrote it in Rolling Stone in June 16th of 2005. I heard about it through there. And there's like 50-something people that were all invited out there to discuss this thing and what they were supposed to do. 53 individuals present at the meeting. There's to break down the composition. There were 15 employees of the CDC, a group that have 14 individuals with academic appointments that often overlap with the other affiliations, 12 individuals directly representing the National Immunization Program, 5 representatives for the vaccine companies of SmithKline, Beecham, Merck, Wyeth, North American Vaccine, and Aventis Pasteur. There were 4 representatives of the American Academy of Pediatrics, 3 individuals from the Food and Drug Administration, 3 individuals were not medical doctors. One of them was a project manager for Northern California Kaiser Vaccine Study, the data manager for Kaiser, and health communication specialist for the National Institutes Program. So there's a bunch of people out there, right? They're not any wellness doctors. I don't think Dr. Hyman got invited to that deal or any of the other guys that I listen to or you listen to, right? But there was some conversations, okay? This one came from Roger Bernier, the Associate Director for the Science of National Immunization Program at the CDC, and he's presented some of the history of thimerosal. Basically, there was a congressional action in 1997 requiring the FDA to review mercury in drugs and biologics. In December of 1998, the Food and Drug Administration had called for information from the manufacturers about mercury in their products. He goes on to say, in the U.S., there are growing recognition that the cumulative exposure may exceed some of the guidelines. There are 3 sets of guidelines that are much in discussion. One from the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, one from the FDA, and one from the Environmental Protection Agency. These guidelines are not all exactly the same. There was a recognition that the cumulative exposure that children receive from vaccinations might actually exceed at least one of the guidelines that is recommended, that of the EPA. So that's just something, right? I don't know what it means. I don't know if it's dangerous. I don't know if it's causing anything, and I'm not saying that it is. It's not my game, right? I'm just saying that I'm reading a guy that is part of the National Immunization Program at the CDC, and he's saying that there's a cumulative exposure that children receive vaccination may actually exceed what the EPA says is good with mercury. And a bunch of these other guys speak in here, and then they talk about aluminum, and this was Johnson, Dr. Johnson. Let me see this, what he said here. See who is Dr. Johnson. Next to present was Dr. Dick Johnson, an immunologist and pediatrician at the University of Colorado School of Medicine. He reviewed some of the history of the government's investigation of thimerosal and then gave some background. And he went through here and he talked about several different things. And he talked about aluminum salts, and secondarily, they don't have much role in recall immunization, but would represent a significant burden to try and develop different vaccines for primary and subsequent immunization. But he went on here and he said this: aluminum and mercury are often simultaneously administered to infants, both at the same size and at different sites. I think it meant both at the same site and at different sites. However, we also learned that there is absolutely no data, including animal data, about the potential for synergy, additivity, or antagonism, all of which can occur in binary metal mixtures that relate to and allow us to draw any conclusion from the simultaneous exposure to these two salts in vaccines. He's saying it right there, plain as day, that there's no data, including animal data, about the potential for synergy. They say aluminum is not bad for you, and they say thimerosal is not bad for you, the mercury, but they don't have any data that says if you put those two things together at the same time, what will happen? And so they went down a little bit further. A series of experiments conducted by Dr. Boyd Haley from the chemistry department at the University of Kentucky and published in the Medical Veritas in 2005. It is well documented in the literature that mercury toxicity is synergistic with other heavy metals such as cadmium and lead. It is also known that certain antibiotics greatly enhance the toxicity of thimerosal in ocular solution, and that antibiotics prevent test animals from excreting mercury. That may be a problem. The major known difference between male and females is in their hormones. Aluminum hydroxide alone at 500 nanometers showed no significant death of cells at 6 hours and only slight toxicity over a 24-hour period. Thimerosal at 50 nanometers affected only a slight increase in neural death at 6 hours. However, in the presence of 50 nanometers of thimerosal plus 500 nanomoles of aluminum hydroxide, the neural death increases roughly 60%, an amazing increase, and clearly demonstrates the synergistic effects of other metals on mercury toxicity and certain thimerosal toxicities. What does that mean? I don't know. I'm just reading what Dr. Boyd Haley from the University of Kentucky published in Medical Veritas in 2005. There's an increase by 60% of neuronal death. Neuronal is nerve. When you mix those two things together. And if you want to go through they've gotten rid of the thimerosal now, except for in flu vaccines and some others, but for the most of them on the children's deal, but they've added the aluminum. Because they've got to add those things in there to make that thing work. And if you go back in the beginning of this thing and you look and see back in 1986, the National Vaccine Act that Ronald Reagan signed into effect, it increased the number. Since 1988, I think, you start to look at the increased number of vaccines that a child gets. And what makes me ask the question, it's like, okay, were we not safe in 1986? Like, were we not safe? You know what? You can go listen to Elizabeth Warren. She just said it this week on go to X and listen to Elizabeth Warren talk about it. She said she's so scared that Robert Kennedy is going to get RFK Jr. is going to get nominated to be HHS secretary, and it's going to affect the vaccines. And what she says out loud to everybody is that we've already been through this before. We were through this in the 1980s when it came down to we only had 2 vaccine manufacturers because they came to Congress and said, we're losing so much money on lawsuits that we can't continue. And I thought to myself, what if Tylenol said that? What if Vioxx said that? That might be something we talk about tomorrow because we're out of time. What about if Vioxx kills people? Will they actually get lawsuits against Vioxx? Yes. What's wrong with having if it's a not safe, if children are getting hurt, why is it something that we should be avoiding? And that's what Elizabeth Warren said this week. It's the same thing that they said in 1986, 1988, whatever that was, that they signed that into law. It's exactly this. We got the same stories going on, and that's happening. So, hope that wasn't too serious. Hope it was helpful. If I can help you, please let me know. It's not my game. My game is wellness, and that's what we do at The Rock. I hope you guys have a great night. We'll be back tomorrow night at 6. Thanks for listening. If there's any, let me check, just make sure. If there's anything I can help you guys with, just want to make sure one more time, my game is wellness. I just read a book. I'm just reporting on it. You can get all this information right here on the internet, just like I got it. You probably already have it. A lot of you guys are dealing with this and been dealing with it for a long time. I had a conversation with a grandma today about her grandchild that has been dealing with it. And but maybe we can help each other be as well as we can possibly be, so that when we take on this stuff on our daily activities of life, that we can win. That's what we're about. Let me know if I can help you. Thanks for listening to the show. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.